The humming of fluorescent lights above my head merged with the low drone of voices spilling out from rooms along the corridor. My mother's voice, sharp and trembling, cut through everything as she faced me just beside the vending machine alcove in the hospital's 6th floor. She tried to lower her voice, but the tremor in it made every word brittle, ready to snap. "Kazuo, this isn't the time for foolishness. Your father's been in surgery for 4 hours and—" She looked away, eyes hard, jaw clenched, as if she could keep both her grief and her anger from leaking out. I could almost see in the shine on the polished corridor floor her own reflection, bending beneath the fluorescent glare. "Mother, I know, but—" I began, but she was already shaking her head. "You know what would have given him peace," she spat. "If you'd listened to him, gone to university, taken the bank job, something stable, something normal." The words strung, not because I hadn't heard them before, I had 100 times 1,000, but because right then, framed by the antiseptic white walls, surrounded by the smells of bleach and old flowers, they felt final. "A chef, Kazuo," she mocked, barely above a whisper, eyes darting to a passing nurse. "Wasting money, 5 years at that little ryotei, coming home with cuts, smelling of onions." She pressed her lips together so tightly her cheeks trembled. "Shameful, impossible." "I'm sorry, Mother." My voice was soft but wouldn't tremble. I wouldn't let it, not while she looked at me with that flicker of disappointment folded into her exhaustion. "This is all I know. This is all I want to do." She made a strangled sound of irritation and pressed her palm to her forehead. My younger brother now hovered behind her, eyes uncertain, posture slouched and apologetic. I recognized in his slouch the same quiet fear I'd always carried, fear of being noticed, fear of being shamed. But I could hold her gaze now, not with anger but with the dumb, stubborn dignity that had carried me this far. They didn't see its cost, they never did. Under the high hats behind the swinging kitchen doors there was always a trembling in my hands, fear of missing a step or burning a broth. Of being nothing, a joke, the homeboy who thought Tokyo had a place for him in its kitchens. Years ago, my uncle Katsuhiro had laughed when I confessed I wanted to cook, imitating my first knife handling with exaggerated slowness at New Year's dinner. "Kazuo wants to be a chef, maybe he'll cut up the sushi for us next year if he doesn't burn down the kitchen." Everyone had chimed in, their laughter bouncing around tatami walls, pulling me apart like stringy beef in a bad nikujaga. The doors down the corridor swung open and a doctor emerged, mask dangling under his chin. We fell silent in an instant. He spoke quietly to my mother, stable for now, my father would recover. Everyone's shoulders unknotted a little. Relief, then exhaustion. My name was not spoken again for the rest of the evening, though it hovered between us, like steam from a simmering pot, thick and heavy. My father never forgave the path I chose, but as he healed, he grew used to my silence at family gatherings. After the hospital, I returned to Tokyo, my small rented room in Sujinami, a box with a kettle and a futon that smelled of ground ginger and fatigue. The kitchen where I apprenticed was an old family ryotei in Nishiazabu, tucked between nondescript apartment blocks. I worked 16-hour days, learning to clean fish until my hands bled and the tips of my fingers became numb to heat and cold alike. Chef Morita, lean as a heron and twice as severe, shouted instructions, making me redo my knife cuts again and again. "Too thick, fool, every slice is a promise, you keep it or you leave." His voice was a constant bitter drizzle soaking into my bones. I burned broth, I overcooked rice. The sous chef Yuta made a game of bumping my elbow just as I poured soup into polished lacquer bowls, making it slosh over the rim. "Maybe cooking isn't for countryside boys," he would sneer, never quite looking me in the eye. It was easier to endure sometimes than my family's silence. I knew what they said back home in Saitama, that I was just another kid chasing Tokyo's neon and getting ground up beneath its boots. Friends from high school would message, "Still cooking noodles?" or send a laughing emoji when I posted a photo of chopped spring onions. My own aunt once replied to my new dish photo with, "Your cousin Natsuki just got promoted at the insurance company. Maybe you'll catch up someday." Still, even humiliation has a shape, and over the years I learned to hold it, to carve it down into something that fit into my pocket. I learned to run my hands over fish bellies, to cradle the promise of flavor in a single pinch of salt. Every morning I checked the sharpness of my knives, whispering names, Hamaguri Tai Kinmadai, as if the right edge could split open a new future for me. My hands gradually stopped shaking. I could fillet a mackerel in 12 seconds. I learned not to look for praise. Chef Morita would sooner offer money to a stray cat than tell me good job. Instead, I became addicted to small moments of calm. The golden light dusting the empty kitchen before the start of evening service, the perfect gleam in a bowl of consommé clear as river water. That was my reward. One night after closing, Morita called me to his office, plain and sparse as a pilgrim's hut. You should go, he grunted, not meeting my eyes. To Paris. The French chef owes me a favor. See if you last Kazuyo. I left the next spring with a suitcase full of chopsticks and anxiety, my family uttering not a word at my departure except from my mother a curt, "Be careful not to cut yourself." Paris was cold, damp, and indifferent. As an Asian cook in a tiny Michelin restaurant, I was nearly invisible. The diners spoke fast, clipped French. The chefs barked at me in slang I didn't understand, but each morning I arrived before everyone else and watched the way butter melted in the corner of the stovetop, how hollandaise thickened like translucent gold. I mashed wasabi into vinaigrettes, weeping with homesickness. The years blurred. I learned to command a kitchen in English, then broken French. I slept 3 hours a night, ate standing up, called home only twice a year. My parents no longer asked when I'd return, now became a teacher. I heard through mutual friends my uncle still joked about the chef who couldn't feed himself. Sometime in my 8th year away, things shifted. A friend, Masaki, called me from Tokyo. He'd saved up money, wrangled a loan, rented a ramshackle spot in Nakameguro, an old record shop, warped wooden floors, windows smeared with old stickers. I came home, pouring my savings into battered pans and reflecting glass. We cleaned every inch, covering up mildew and history in equal measure. We named it Utsuroy Transition. I designed a menu bridging what I'd stolen from the French and what I longed for in the stews of my childhood. Saba cooked with yuzu butter, miso-glazed lamb with mountain herbs, Parisian milfoil stuffed with anko and black sesame. Masaki's friends came and then their friends, and soon we were full every night. Some evenings, I watched the lights on the Meguro River glitter in the window, remembering how badly I'd wanted someone to tell me I'd done well. Soon, bloggers wrote. Critics grumbled into their napkins, then published quiet raves, surprised at a no-name chef doing things they couldn't puzzle out. 6 months after opening, a faded envelope appeared. Michelin wanted to visit. The night before, I lay awake and ran my hands over the calluses on my knuckles. I cooked as if my family were in the room, every movement a kind of quiet rebellion. When the first star came, my mother called. "I saw your name in the paper." Her voice was tentative, unwilling to hand over too much pride lest it be misplaced. Even the people at the market mentioned it. My father, who never called, sent a text. Just one line: "Saw you on TV, the food looks fine, don't forget about your mother." 16 words, more than he'd given me in 5 years. But even then, Utsuroy was not truly mine, not yet. Success creeps up with its own burdens. I had a staff of 9, a partner who grumbled about going too French, and regulars who turned up their noses if a recipe changed. The pressure pressed on my chest the way Chef Morita used to grip my shoulder, hard enough to warn, soft enough to teach. If I failed now, it'd be a public, spectacular failure. Something for uncles to titter over at New Year's, for cousins to sigh over at weddings, and still I cooked, through 12-hour stretches and personal heartbreaks, through burnt sauces and power outages. The work never left room for triumph. Now on the eve of my 10th year away, another call. My father's 80th birthday. My mother asked in her old formal way if I would come home to make dinner for the family and their friends. I looked around Utsuroy, the gleaming steel, the bursts of laughter from Masaki and the servers, the menu chalked in my shaky hand, and for the first time I was not afraid. The train slid north through the outskirts of Tokyo, cherry trees leaning over the tracks, petals dusting the rails. My knife case was heavy on my lap. I watched my own reflection in the window, pale and older, traced with sleeplessness and a kind of fragile pride. Saitama's familiar streets, their electric wires sagging, their convenience stores unchanged, welcomed me with a chill in the air. The house was immaculate as ever, shoes lined up, seaweed drying on a line, my mother moving with the restless energy of someone who's lived decades in one place. Inside, the kitchen was smaller than the walk-in at Utsuroy, but glowing with the comfort of my childhood. Miso, seaweed, brewing tea, faint traces of garlic in the corners. My mother gave instructions curtly as if I'd never left. Now hovered, offering to chop, to stir, to help, nervous as though once again we were boys fearing father's displeasure. Just as I brined strips of berry for a citrus cure, my uncle Katsuhiro arrived. Shorter than I remembered but still broad-shouldered, his voice rang out. "Kazuyo, the Paris chef returns. Is the fish good enough for you, or must we fly it from France?" I bowed polite. Locally caught is the best, uncle. Thank you for letting me cook in your presence. The words were light, but in his smile was the old mocking twist. The guests came, family friends mostly, Mr. Shimizu from the bank, Aunt Keiko with her heavy perfume, a few of my cousins claiming space near the beer cooler, now's friends from the school. At the back of the room, my parents. Father's shoulders still straight, face softer now, as if time had worn away all but its essentials. I cooked through the bustle, the laughter and side eyes, the sense that some of them still waited for me to drop a plate or oversalt the soup. My mother arranged platters, now poured drinks. Uncle Katsuhiro hovered behind me, watching as I plated berry with yuzu, wild mountain herbs and a spring radish confit. He coughed. You won a Michelin Star, they said on TV. But you'll find Saitama tastes are simple, eh? I smiled without turning. Simple is hardest, uncle. I learned that in Paris. His eyebrows twitched, caught between amusement and pride. Let's see if your city tricks work here. They say chefs in Tokyo forget how to cook for family. I nodded, letting the next course, miso-glazed lamb with sancho and wild greens, speak for me. The dining room filled with the sound of chopsticks tapping and low murmurs. My father ate silently, methodically. My mother darted glances between him and me, as if measuring the distance time had carved between us. My hands trembled just slightly as I carried the rice, the pickles, the final silky bowl of clear broth. Uncle Katsuhiro took a taste and made a show of smacking his lips. Not bad for a banker's son. He didn't look at me, but the sparkle in his eye was almost gentle. Later, as dishes were cleared and beer refilled, Mr. Shimizu, tipsy and red-cheeked, boomed out, Kazuo-san, your father says you're famous now. The whole neighborhood watched you on TV last month. You really made it, eh? And all from a little kitchen in Paris. The talk grew. Someone had printed out an online article waving it for others to see. Chef Kazuo Yumoto wins Michelin Star for Utsuroy. My mother, quiet, relented enough to tell Aunt Keiko about the French dignitaries who had come, about the magazine in which my interview had appeared. They spoke openly of the restaurant now, no longer avoiding its name or the fact that it existed at all. I took out my phone and showed them a blue silk-bound book, the official Michelin guide from the previous year, Kazuo Yumoto of Utsuroy, marked with a single shining star. There was a moment, as real as anything I had ever felt, when the room quieted and my father, who had not truly met my gaze since I was 17, reached out his hand and took the book from me, squinting at the picture. Then slowly he passed it to my uncle, who passed it around until it made its way back to Now, whose smile was impossibly wide. Nobody made a joke. Nobody told me I'd burned fish or wasted talent or betrayed the family. For the first time, I felt their silence as a kind of respect. My father rose, straightening the edge of the low table. His voice was rough but clear. You showed us, Kazuo, I was wrong. This is also a life. He nodded, and perhaps it was more for his own pride than mine, but the weight in my chest lifted and I let myself breathe. Later, as the guests left, my mother pressed a bag into my hands. Dried persimmons, home-pickled plums, a stack of neatly folded hand towels for the restaurant. For good luck, she said, her voice wavering only a little. Don't let them say our boy forgot his manners. I carried everything through the old kitchen, across the shoes lined up at the door, past the sagging electric wires, into the soft Tokyo night. I would return to Utsuroy soon, the shining steel, the rattle and clamor. But for the first time as I stepped onto the silent street, I felt a place had been set for me here again, a bowl, a pair of chopsticks, waiting in case I came home for supper.